Good morning, second hour. Let's talk about what we're doing today on this lovely Thursday. So, today we get to read and analyze our last work of Unit 2, which is Song of Myself by Whitman. So, just like I did with I Hear America Singing, I'm going to read the poem with you so that you can hear it as well as read it. And I'm going to give you a start on analyzing it. For this analysis, that you need to have at least one clear text citation. And of course, I'll go over the handout with you. So by the end of the hour, you should have some time to finish task 3 and get in this week 9 handout, and then go back and get whatever you need for week 8 in. And of course, if you've finished all of my stuff, you are more than welcome to work on another class. That's not a problem. So at this point, I'm going to show you your week 9 handout again. If you haven't had a chance, open that now. So I'm going to go over what you're going to write today. So we already did the first analysis. And if you missed the first analysis for whatever reason, I not only have the video of it posted, after this class, I'm going to post this handout that we're seeing right meow into your examples resources folder. So you have that as a guide to complete your work. Okay, so today, like I said, we get to do Song of Myself. I've already done the first answer for you. So just like last time, we're going to go through the steps of poetry analysis. So it starts with literal meaning. Summarize what the poem is about. What does the author say? So at this point, I'm going to go open up the Schoology page with the actual poem on it, read it with you, and then we'll come back to this handout. And yesterday, it was not your imagination if you had some issues with Schoology. It was being kind of weird. So hopefully this works out for us. Knock on wood. So Song of Myself by Walt Whitman. As you may recall, Leaves of Grass was the poem book that Walt Whitman published, self-published. This poem is from there. We don't have the complete poem because it's quite lengthy. We have 3 stanzas of it, which is plenty for our purposes today, which is to analyze the poem. So Song of Myself by Walt Whitman. I celebrate myself and sing myself, and what I assume, you shall assume, for every atom belonging to me, as good belongs to you. I loaf and invite my soul. Loaf is kind of just laying around being lazy. I loaf and invite my soul. I lean and loaf at my ease, observing a spear of summer grass. My tongue, every atom of my blood, formed from this soil, this air. Born here of parents, born here from parents the same, and their parents the same. I, now 37 years old, in perfect health begin, hoping to cease, not till death. Creeds and schools in abeyance, retiring back a while, suffice at what they are, but never forgotten. In other words, yeah, I remember the things I learned in school, and I still have the models from when I was young, but I'm older now and I'm beyond those kind of rules, basically. I harbor for good or bad. I permit to speak at every hazard. Nature without check with original energy. So that's stanza 1, and then they give us stanza 6. A child said, "What is the grass?" fetching it to me with full hands. How could I answer the child? I do not know what it is any more than he. I guess it must be the flag of my disposition, out of hopeful green stuff woven. Or I guess it's the handkerchief of the Lord. A scented gift and remembered, sir, designedly dropped. So here he's describing grass with figurative language. He's comparing it to other things. This, for example, is a metaphor. The grass isn't literally the flag of his disposition. So let me give you this line 16. I guess it must be the flag of my disposition, out of hopeful green stuff woven. So he's saying the grass is like a flag that shows his personality. That's a metaphor. He's making a comparison. It's not literally that. So he's going to continue using some figurative language here to describe what he thinks of and feels when he sees grass. Bearing the owner's name some way in the corners, that we may see and remark and say, whose? Or I guess the grass is itself a child, the produced babe of the vegetation. Or I guess it is a uniform hieroglyphic, and it means sprouting alike in broad zones and narrow zones, growing among black folks as among white, Canuck, Tuckahoe, Congressman, Cuff. I give them the same, I receive them the same. So, in other words, here he's saying that no matter what the grass is, it grows under all people. It doesn't matter what color you are, it doesn't matter where you're from, grass is still going to grow under your feet just like it does for everyone else. And now it seems to me the beautiful uncut hair of graves. Tenderly I will use you, curling grass. It may be you transpire from the breasts of young men. It may be if I had known them, I would have loved them. It may be you are from old people or from offspring taken too soon out of their mother's laps. And here you are, the mother's laps. So now he's thinking about the grass in terms of life, how long life lives. And he's thinking about how grass, it's kind of a morbid thought, but he's thinking about how grass grows over graves. And people, grass and nature are eternal, whereas people aren't. People have a shorter lifespan. This grass is very dark to be from the white heads of old mothers, darker than the colorless beards of old men, dark to come from under the faint red roofs of mouths. Oh, I perceive after all so many uttering tongues, and I perceive they do not come from the roofs of mouths for nothing. I wish I could translate the hints about the dead young men and women, and the hints about old men and mothers, and the offspring taken soon out of their laps. What do you think has become of the young and old men? And what do you think has become of the women and children? They're alive and well somewhere. The smallest sprout shows there is really no death. And if ever there was, it led forward life and does not wait at the end to arrest it and cease the moment life appeared. All goes onward and outward. Nothing collapses, and to die is different from what anyone supposed and luckier. So perhaps some surprising attitudes about death there. And then finally, we get stanza 52 to end our reading of Whitman today. The spotted hawk swoops by and accuses me. He complains of my gab and my loitering. I too am not a bit tamed. I too am untranslatable. I sound my barbaric yawp over the roofs of the world. So now he's watching this hawk and thinking, I'm a lot like that hawk. I can screech to show I'm alive. I am also wild. I am connected to nature. The last scud of day holds back for me. It flings my likeness after the rest, and true as any on the shadowed wilds. It coaxes me to the vapor in the dusk. I depart as air. I shake my white locks at the runaway sun. I effuse my flesh in eddies and drift it in lacy jags. I bequeath myself to the dirt to grow from the grass I love. If you want me again, look for me under your boot soles. So now he's thinking about the end of his life. You will hardly know who I am or what I mean, but I shall be good health to you nevertheless, and filter and fiber your blood. Failing to fetch me at first, keep encouraged. Missing me one place, search another. I stop somewhere, waiting for you. So let's talk about analysis for this. So literal meaning, what is the author talking about? He talks about quite a few things. So you can summarize one main idea or the overall main idea here. So I wrote, and yes, you can take this answer. The speaker is celebrating their life and how it connects to others in nature. You could also write something along the lines of the speaker is thinking about life and death, because both those things are in there. Next, we got to decide what kind of poem is this? So the first thing we do is we look for a rhyme scheme. There's no rhyme scheme in this poem. Like, I thought about going back and showing you, but I'm like, you can just see it. There's no clear rhyme scheme. It sounds more like a conversation, which is the goal of free verse. Whitman was one of the first poets to use this type, and that's part of what makes him significant. He really opened up what a poem looks like for people. So long story short, poetic form. What kind of poem is this? Free verse. Make sure you have both words. Don't just write free verse. So that means for rhyme scheme, we can write none or NA for not applicable. I'm going to pause so you can write those things, and then I'll move on to talking about the rest. Let's move on to part 3. So next is imagery. This is where you need a text citation. So you're going to go back into the poem, find any phrase that the author uses to describe things that really appeals to your senses. It's really hard to pick a bad one for this. I mean, anything that you can picture. So you're going to write that there in a text citation. I didn't do this one for you because I want you to do it, but you do have an example from yesterday's answers on what a text citation looks like. To give you a guide, after you've written the text citation carefully for Whitman, then you write why you picked it. So just briefly, the meaning of it, what you picked, or why it captured your attention, why you chose it. All right, next, 4, literary devices. I picked parallelism because there's a lot of this in the poem, and it's one of the new devices that I taught you that's specific for Whitman. The one we used yesterday was cataloging. So here I just write the type, parallelism, and yes, you can have these answers. So what's an example of this in the poem? Quite a bit in that first stanza, but specifically I picked lines 4 and 5 have similar phrasing, and that's what parallelism is, where you either repeat or have similar phrasing from line to line. So lines 4 and 5 have similar phrasing in describing how the speaker loafs. Then last, you have to write, well, why? Why did this poet choose to do this? What does it do in the poem? In other words, the effect or meaning. So it helps keep the flow. And remember, that's the answer you can use for any of the literary devices. Keeps the flow. And in this case, it emphasizes that loafing is important. Whenever you have phrasing that's similar from line to line, it shows the idea in that phrasing is key. I'm going to pause. You can write that, and then we're going to talk about number 5. Okay. So for number 5, you're going to go back into the poem and find figurative language. I pointed out some examples of metaphor for you as we reviewed this. You can use those. That's fine. So first, write the type. Here's the types for you to choose from. Write an example from the poem. So you can either explain it the way I did for device or use a text citation. And then just like for device, you're going to write what's the effect or meaning of that figurative language. Then your last step in analyzing this poem is you're going to reskim it and decide what's the author's message. So in other words, what's the theme? What does this poem say about life or about people? And then what evidence do you have from the poem to support that? That can be describing, or you can use a text citation. Both are equally good. But remember, you need at least one correct text citation for the answer on number 3, imagery. So you lovelies have the rest of the time to work on this. Meanwhile, as promised, I'm going to post these answers to your resources file so you have that as a start. Go for it. Use your time.